can remember, is simply talk a little bit. John is asking about the beginnings of the Institute for Research on Learning. And as you dropped a chicken on the streets of Palo Alto, we're sort of getting into some of the basic fundamentals that were radical enough at the time to light a few people's fuses. What was going on there? Tell me a little bit about the beginnings of IRL.
Well, I think, first of all, the beginnings of IRL was based on the fact that I think this whole field was not attracting the world-class scientists that in those days physics was attracting.
The field being learning technology.
Learning technology, right. And so, I had various kids, graduate students from MIT, come to me saying they would love to be able to do a doctoral thesis in this field, but they were being advised against it. They didn't think it was safe. It was a second-rate field. They couldn't afford to, start their career doing something in a second-rate field. And so one idea was, could we actually create something like the Institute for Theoretical Physics at Santa Barbara that would bring a whole new set of people together in a completely different kind of a culture that would strive for really going to the root of potentially a new theory of learning. So that was the original hope. And kind of around that, the situated learning theory started to emerge. And the situated learning theory was considered extraordinarily controversial in the early days because basically most theories of knowledge and learning, and the academy even to this day, kind of deifies the decontextualization of knowledge, trying to make it increasingly more abstract, to pull it out of a context, to make it very, very abstract. So the more abstract it is in theory, the more it applies to more and more situations. So it made total sense to an awful lot of people saying, if you really want to take this learning experience and actually have it apply to all kinds of things in your life, well, decontextualize it, push the levels of abstraction up, so then you can project it down into all kinds of new situations. Of course, overlooking the fact that how do you remember something that's totally decontextualized, and how do you project it down into new situations, okay? So the opposing point of view is saying, no, what we do is we kind of learn things in context, and then in some ways context and content start to commingle in very, very powerful ways, and there's a much richer sense of things being learned by not decontextualizing them, but honoring the context that they came from, and then looking at how that context that created the original insight itself might be mappable onto new types of contexts. So in a funny sort of way, we decided to move away from a theory of abstraction, but recognize that you can still push for generalities, but generalities often lie in the particulars. So we look for generalities, not abstractions, but we look for ways to capture those generalities in terms of the particulars. So in some sense, that sets the framework for example, stories. Stories have kind of a minimal amount of context that is captured by the particulars, but then produce a moral for the story that is carried by the particulars of the context, that helps you remap that situation on brand new situations. So in fact, we actually built a whole new theory of transfer by looking at how context moves onto context rather than how abstraction projects onto a new situation. So, so in some ways, we completely understood the importance of generality, but drew a sharp distinction between generality and abstraction. And that is where we got the power, because we think that, in fact, the context and the particulars provide the constraints for how human memory actually works, that then enables us to kind of pull something out of context, but then remap it into, in a very, very powerful, creative way, almost a form of bricolage, a new type of situation.
Now, John, as you describe this, and a lot of it's sort of sunk into our general consciousness, I think. It seems so logical and natural and no problem, but these ideas were under attack when they were first
Of course,
brought out?
this whole idea of honor the situation and don't look for the most abstract principles possible is a move away from a Cartesian theory of knowledge, and also a notion of a delivery model of education. So what do is you take these abstractions and you render them in some networked form in terms of how they tie into other abstractions, and then you deliver them in a delivery model of education. So your great lecturers, often find great ways to take these abstractions and kind of make them a bit concrete for you. But in fact, this idea that no, take experience as the foundation of learning and try to wrap an experience up in terms of kind of content and context all intermingled with each other was very much against the delivery model of education. But it did start to support why the role of the narrative becomes such a critical way to pass knowledge on from generation to generation to generation. So the very principles underlying our civilization comes from the ability to tell and pass stories on. The theories of abstraction never accounted for that, nor did classroom learning account for that. And so, starting with some of the kind of brilliant insights of Jean Lave, we went back to fundamentals. She went back to Africa to actually understand just how much knowledge is being captured in kind of an apprenticeship form, or now we think of it as a kind of very focused communities of practice. How does it live in the practice rather than how does it live in the mind? And the practice itself is distributed amongst people and artifacts and practices around those artifacts and people.
Well, John, thank you very much, and I hope that you do sway the future of American education.
Well, that would be a big dream for all of us, I'm sure.
Hey, 1% is plenty.
Yeah,
Bye for now.
Right.